Thank you. So, good evening, everyone. I am Giulio Tedeschi, and FIFA Licenza Agent, CEO and founder of Tedeschi and Partners Women's Football Management. So, basically, today I have the pleasure to have on the stage with me. Let me present Erkut Sogut. Big applause, please. Thanks. Thank you. Then Nathaniel. And then Georgia Adderley and Vitor Gonçalves. I will present you better than each of them. So today I have the honor to moderate this panel called Special Agents. Are they working for players? How to say, let me present the first one properly, Erkut. Erkut Sogut, coming from US, Erkut is a FIFA Licenza agent and also professor at university, author of different books and having some lectures, which I had the pleasure to attend some of them, and also founder of a sport education company called the Sports Agents Academy, among many other things, I have to say, Erkut. So I have the first question for you, Erkut. We are living in ever-changing times for FIFA agents. You also participated in 2018 for the works from FIFA with the new FFAR. What's your point of view regarding these regulations, with these new FIFA regulations, where we are and where we will arrive?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for the intro, and thanks for everyone for coming to today's panel. I'm really looking forward to discuss these very interesting things, which is very actual in the last few years, and it's all over. And today is actually the day, guys, where the FIFA agent exam results coming out. So hundreds of agents all over the world today receiving the results. And that's also time-wise very good. So there are I think when I look from a timeline perspective, in 2018, FIFA started an agent consultation process, right? With agents together, how can we change the agent regulations? Because FIFA actually in 2015, as many of you know, has actually said we don't want to do any more agent regulations, right? Most of the deals are done by people who are not agents, approximately 70%. But then they said, oh, it doesn't work out like this. It's like the Wild West. We need to go back to centralize the system and create regulations for agents all over the world. And I joined this consultation process in 2018 with some agents from different parts of the world. And like the former who passed away, Mino Raiola, was a part of this consultation, or Jonathan Barnett from England, and many other agents from all over the world. And the goal and aim was, and I'm a favor of regulations, by the way, to say it from the beginning, I believe that good regulations, worldwide binding regulations, is good for the agency world, but also good for football in general. Because if you have good regulations, you have a barrier to become an agent. I believe an exam was necessary, because it's not something, it shouldn't be so easy to represent someone else's career, right? And a football player's career is not very long, as we know. Average 8 years, maybe if you're very lucky, you play over 10 years. So having the responsibility, helping someone about their career, without having any knowledge about any background, I don't think is the right thing. So therefore, I was always in favor for agent regulations. That's why I was advocating there. And my role was more the educational side, because I believe in a good education for agents that will help the whole football environment. And yes, this process started, and it went on until 2021. I left the process. And that was a time when I realized I don't have really proper impact, right? That was when I realized, wait a minute, we want to create agent regulations, but this consultation process is not actually what I was thinking of, right? The intention was correct of FIFA to bring the stakeholders on one table and do it together, rather than saying, we are FIFA, we are creating regulations, and everyone has to follow it. I don't think it's the right approach. So FIFA wanted to talk with agents, but the way it was done, it wasn't the right way, in my personal opinion. That's why I felt I'm not representing agents while I'm there. Things are happening which are not in favor of us, and I have no impact. So that's why I left the consultation process. And as you guys all know, in 2023, the new FIFA agent regulation came into force. That's the second part of the talk now. So the first part was before and now. Now we have regulations which wasn't actually agreed with agents. We are in a situation where many agents said, we don't like what you have done, because of many reasons. And one of the reasons all of you know is the fee cap. FIFA said, for example, agents shouldn't earn more than 3% when the income is around from $200,000 upwards. Agents shouldn't earn more than 3%. That was a one discussional point, right? And many others, multiple representation, and agents should show how much money they earn publicly. Can you imagine an agent in Nigeria will live in an area where the area boy is telling, I earned this year $100,000, and he needs to make it public, right? There were many topics for discussion, and FIFA still went through. They announced this in a way agents didn't want it, and now what happened? Agents started suing FIFA in different countries all around the world, including like Brazil, right, in South America, but mainly in Europe, you have seen it. And one major case, guys, in Germany, Landgericht Dortmund, for the ones in Germany will know it very well, said your regulations don't apply here in Germany. So they put a preliminary injunction and stopped FIFA regulations in Germany because of many reasons. I'm a lawyer, so I know what kind of reasons. That was what I'm trying to explain FIFA, but they didn't want to listen to that at the time. So every case actually is won by agents, right? Either they got a preliminary injunction or the court send it to the European Court of Justice, where it is today. The only case FIFA won, the only case, is at CAS. So I'm a lawyer, right? And you're interested about, wait a minute, agents winning all the cases all over the world. The only case agents lost are at CAS. So you go in and check the reasons for that, right? As a normal human being. And I went in and I said, like, wait a minute. Was anyone representing the agents in this case? It was one of the worst represented cases I've seen in my life as a lawyer. With other words, agents were not represented in the case. It was a show, it was a makeup show between FIFA and the guys who were supposed to representing agents, and the result, you can read it as a normal person. The judge is even asking, like, why don't you prove something? Why don't you say something? Why don't you can see it in the, and you guys, you're also like, you have read it as well. So now we are in a situation, guys, we are waiting now for the decision of the European Court of Justice. And it will either come end of this year or next year. And there are two different outcomes. Either the European Court of Justice will say, it could happen, none of the FIFA regulations apply, because FIFA is not even eligible or has the right to decide about agents. This could happen, which is a big danger for FIFA, then everything is gone. Or the more likely case, European Court of Justice will say, yes, you can regulate agents, FIFA, but you can't do salary caps. You can't do restriction on certain rules because it's against European law. And I think that's the most likely case. That's where we are today. It's a little bit confusing for agents. You are a FIFA agent, but then you work in Italy. You need to have a license there. Then you work in France. So it's still not very global. We are still in the making.
Thank you. Thanks, Erkut. I think, just to comment on what you say, this is actually the problem. We don't have a unique regulation that helps the work of agents, and this creates only, of course, problems and mistakes in contractual laws in every country. So thanks for it. The topic of today is about if FIFA agents works for the players. So I'm going to go to ask to Chris. Let me first present properly Chris. Nathaniel is the CEO and founder of NVA Sports and Entertainment. He's based in the heart of London. And Chris, I got caught my attention from one of the first statement you have on your website that I will just report very quickly. When says, we believe talent is best nurtured in a true family environment. Our team should serve as an extension of yours, prioritizing the holistic need of the player. So, well, can you explain us in concrete the holistic approach, what your agency does for players?
Thank you very much for everyone being here. Chris Nathaniel from NBA Sports and Entertainment Group. I think as an agent, we're here to facilitate the player's dream. And as part of that dream, the family are an important part of that. So what we set out to do when we first engage with a player is basically find out what's the player's dream, what's the family's dream, where do they all want to go together? Because nowadays it's not just about the player. It's the player, it's the family, it's everyone. You have to have everyone all on board. We then also plug into the club's needs. So it's everybody being on the same page. It's understanding where everyone wants to go to. Once that's been established, then you work out what are the club lacking from the player that they need the support from the agent. We then do the same with finding out the dynamics of the family, what the family needs, and making sure the club are aware of the issues that players' families have. You know, we've had situations where clubs are not aware that the family are going through very difficult financial situations that's putting pressure on the player, which ultimately will affect him in his performances, etc. So it's having that full understanding of what everybody needs, making sure that everybody's all on the same side, and therefore then you can then start to put your plan going forward. Because without everyone being on board together, then it's not going to work. And people have this perception that agents come in and the first thing they want to do is, where can I make some money? You know, where can I move this player to make some money? And that is far from the truth.
Thanks, thanks, Chris. I think what you were saying is totally true, even because we were speaking before the panel for 5 of us, and we all agreed on that, the importance of an agency, you know, into an agency or an agent into the career of a player. Especially, I think the topic that we have to highlight is that agents follow the dreams and the interest of a player, but that's all. So then, when other people enter into this world, like family members and friends and some other from outside, without the right knowledge, you know, of things and rules, then they create bubbles of problems that is always highlighted to agents' problems, and agents hard ones to take monies, which is not. But anyway, thanks for answering. I'm gonna go now presenting Georgia Adderley. Georgia is the managing director of Ad Management. Pleasure to have you here, Georgia. You have a decade of experience as a PR, basically, and marketing, working with various brands and celebrities. So you then slightly decide to have this big challenge in becoming an agent. So after years of experience in another field of football. So I would like to ask you, because we see more than a focus on off the pitch cases and solutions for players. How important do you think is for an agent to support, I would say, the person, not instead than a player, but the person and then the player itself?
Yeah, I think it's so important, and like to go back on what Chris said, like the holistic approach is really, really important. And at the end of the day, like we're dealing with human beings, and I think a lot of stakeholders, agents as well, it can be easy to forget that these players are people, and I think that's what we always need to come back to. And I think it's really important that also clubs take that into consideration, and I think it's important for players when they're choosing their agent as well. You know, it's a personality match at the end of the day. You've got to really get on with your agent. You've got to trust who you're working with. And, you know, I'm very new in my agent career, as you said. I previously was working more with celebrities and influencers, so the world of football agency is a little bit different for me, and goes back to the complication of the FIFA rules, which are quite hard to keep up with at the moment. But I think it's really important to have an agent that matches you. And even me being new in my career, I've had a couple of players approach me and we're just not the right fit for each other. And that's okay. And I've recommended them elsewhere, and I've had players been recommended to me as well, just to what my strengths are. And obviously that's more on the commercial side at the moment. But I think it's really important to have that human-to-human connection, which can sometimes get lost in the craziness of football.
Totally agree with you, Georgia. Vitor, I present to the audience. Vitor Gonçalves is actually the CFO of ProEleven. ProEleven is one of the biggest agencies in Portugal. And I remember personally Vitor, one of Vitor's clients, Diogo Dalot, as an Inter of Milan fan, because he made an assist against Inter of Milan with AC Milan. So we were not presenting at the beginning in a very friendly way, but then we discovered a friendship. Vitor, from you, I would like to discover deeper the day-to-day routine of an agent or an agency. So could you describe like a typical day of work from your side, if you can? Of course, it's not easy, I know, but just describing a little.
Julius, hi everybody. So it's a pleasure to be here. I'm very happy to be here in SoccerX. But also, I'm sad because yesterday I had two players playing in Olympiacos. They won the Conference League, so I'm very happy for them. But I was not there with them. I was not there in the party. It was a big party in Athens, very special for the boys, and I was here. So this is also being an agent. We cannot be everywhere. It's good to be a part of an agency, big agency like us, because we have 25% working daily in the company. But if anyone goes now to my office, probably they don't realize that this is about football on the first sight, because they will see guys doing, working on computers, having meetings, always on the phone. So, of course, you have to love football to be here working, but also you need to love work, because my work starts from 8 a.m. until 11 p.m. So people need to have this both loves, work and football. So there's no regular day. Every day is different. I could be traveling all over the world. So probably this year I already visit 15 or 16 countries. I can be full day in the office just taking calls. I can be just doing stuff with my working group. So it's a company. So it's not a simple agent only doing things about football. I always say in the funny way that my work starts when the game ends. So after the game, we are working. And fortunately, go back to what they did yesterday, Olympiacos. So I know because they won the title, probably they will be high scored in the market, so it will be good for them and also good for us.
Thanks, Vitor. We can even summarize what you said, part of what you said. Agency instead of agent, no? Because agency, the whole organization, I think, now in 2024 is very important to have an organization. You want to say something?
I just want to add something. You forgot an important part, I think. We also have to work with the parents of the players and the wives and the girlfriends now, or the boyfriends, or the wives, husbands, whatever. It changed so much. When I started 20 years ago, it was like you would only work with the client. That was the only job. You go to an agency. I started like as an intern in Hanover back in 2001. I was a law student, but I was working in an agency. And your only client was the player. That's it. Or a coach, right? That was the client. You would never, ever be in touch with someone from the family. It was very rare, right? But today is the opposite. When you sign a player, you talk to the family members, or you talk sometimes to a brother, your father, a mother, the wife. So even when you take decisions, they are involved. My wife doesn't like Manchester. She would rather go to London. So, okay, then you need to find an opportunity in London. It changed so much that they became a part of, taking care of. And it's also so time-consuming and sometimes exhausting, which in the past when I was working as an agent, I don't do that anymore, just working for off-the-pitch people. But it's exhausting. I think that's a big part of our life, isn't it, Vitor? I think it's huge.
Yes. Also, another thing. Yesterday, everybody was saying congratulations to Olympiacos, to the coach, to the players, but I didn't receive any messaging saying, hey, good work, because both players were not playing on their teams, and Olympiacos signed 8 players in January. So if they didn't sign the players, if it wasn't for the agents, they didn't win this title.
That's true. That's true. We were all together with the same vision, before, guys, before this panel, on the fact that maybe the problem that agencies and agents had and still have is the fact that we sometimes fight against each others and we are not united. Clubs has those association of clubs. Formally we have, but in practical examples, we prefer sometimes to make war against each other, stalling clients, instead of having, we say, using your word, an holistic approach of agencies. So thanks Vitor for this. And Erkut, just because you have the mic, you took the mic on the last question. Another question to you. The topic again is saying agents are really working for players. You have a lot of contacts now. You are helping other agents, no? And you are not only helping agents, coach managers, clubs. with different countries and cultures. So how do you handle the whole process to the best of the clients?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we all think our clients are the players. That's a misconception, right? And agents mostly represent clubs, right? But the outside world will see us as people representing the play on the pitch. That's only one part of the story. So as an agent, also under FIFA regulations, you are allowed or eligible to represent a player, the selling club, the buying club, the coach, or even a coach for a national team, right? So you have different people you deal with, work with, sometimes with people from the national team, sometimes with the selling club, buying club, or the player. So there are different parties you can work with and you work. Some agents are focusing on some areas. Some agents are focusing only on selling club because they have some people inside the clubs, they're good friends with them, so they get always 10% of every deal they do, right? And that's interesting, you guys. FIFA said the selling club agent should earn 10%. And the player agent only 3%. So now you understand lobbyism and politics behind the scenes. Why would FIFA give an agent who represents the club 10%, and for me, who looking 5 years, 6 years of a young player, coming my first deal and they say you get only 3? There is no logic. That's politics and lobbyism behind the scenes, because all the guys inside the clubs, they want to still pay their family members and friends and good buddies the 10%, and which they get a kickback from that. That's the real reality. I mean, this is the truth. Not many people talk about that, but it's a part of the business as well. And representing the players, yeah, you have to represent the client. Your best interest should be the client's interest when you work with a client. It doesn't matter if it's a player or if it's a club. But we have also in football multiple representation. That means in the same deal, you can represent the selling club, the buying club, and the player, and you can be paid by all three parties. And everyone knows the Mino Raiola deal with Juventus, Pogba to Manchester United. He got paid 50 million euros in one deal from all three parties together. But that's not the day-to-day business of an agent, right? That was one deal, right? But it's this, I mean, is it ethically correct that an agent can represent all three parties' best interest in the same deal? In my opinion, not. It's a conflict of interest for me from a legal perspective, but it's allowed today. And that was one of the regulations FIFA wanted to change, but couldn't. But so having the best interest, and if you go from the player side, let's go only to the player side. If you sign a player and you want to work with a player, one of the difficulties are you have only 2 years' time. So how can you build a long-term relationship with the player and the family with a 2 years exclusive representation contract? In some countries, you can't even do that. In Germany, you can't even do an exclusive contract with the client. It's not allowed under German law. There was a court decision, and now in Germany, you can sign players only non-exclusively. Imagine you sign a player on a non-exclusive or only for 2 years. You build a relationship, 16 years old, come to 18 years old, you have so much time and energy and money, you go to the game travel, another agent coming from the side, giving the family 100,000 euro. The player said, sorry, Erkut, you have done very well the last 2 years, but I'm going with this agency now. So how much time? We don't have much time, you know. You can argue from the other side, from the player side, saying, hey, by the way, I don't want to have an agent for more than 2 years, right? You can see from both sides, and I understand. But it's difficult, especially for young agents, aspiring agents who are starting new in this business, to establish themselves as a sole agent or within a smaller agency. Because it's very difficult for you to compete with big agencies. And today's arena in football agency world is you need to be a business agent. The time of being a play agent is over. You will not survive outside. If you do the agent exam and says, I want to be an agent, you have no chance. You need to think business-minded. You need to think like a business person. You need to do deals off the pitch. You need to deal for pitch, marketing deals. You need to represent a coach, then a player. You might even represent players from other sports. That's the future, right? And that's if you have that mindset, you'll be much more successful than only thinking and focusing, signing 2 young players from Ajax Academy, and I want to be a big agent. No chance. And the reality is as well, big agencies are coming together and creating even bigger agencies. That means in the past, agents were controlling a player. Now agents controlling the whole system. That means they have access to the clubs via different people working inside the clubs. They have access through the player. So that environment is changing, and you might better become a part of this group rather than be a sole agent.
Thanks, Erkut. It's like very insightful speech you gave. I was listening to you like when I was your student, like this. Okay, let me give some other. Okay, thanks for it. Chris, go back to you. I have a question always tailored on your expertise, and I summarize this like life after sports. We as agents are trying to take care of the career of a player, but I always say, what happens next when the player, man or woman, decide to quit the career? The age of players, the percentage of players that alone can still survive after the game, just only with savings on what he or she did during the career, are how many? Less than 10%, we say, for the global numbers. So how your agency and how you are trying to help players for what happened next?
Well, that's a real big issue, because if we look at the stats, particularly in England, you're talking about sort of 80% of players going bankrupt within 2 or 3 years of finishing their careers, and these are players that are earning sort of 150, 200,000 pounds a week. I had a Premier League player who was earning 150,000 pound a week, got his wages on the first of the month. By the third of the month, he's into his overdraft. And this wasn't particularly a player that lived that lavish lifestyle. What he had was a very big house, big car, what it's like, training ground. You go in Man City's training ground, someone's got the latest Lamborghini, the player goes in there, thinks, well, I need to get the latest one, I need to get a higher one than that. And, it's everyone fighting against each other for bragging rights in the car park. So it's very tough, and as an agent, there's only so much you can tell your player, because what will happen when these players are made bankrupt? What does everyone say? What did the agent do about it? Who was his agent? And lots of time it's nothing to do with the agent. You can't control a grown man and tell him what he does with his money. It's his prerogative. And then you've got the hangers-on, you've got the family. There are so many people that need to be supported by this. Every player is like a business. He's supporting multiple different people, etc. So what we try to do, and we do this from a very early stage. When I mentioned about our holistic approach with young players, when we sign a young player, our thing is about finding about, as well as the family, the club, etc. We want to find what the young person likes doing himself, so that we can start to understand where his exit route is. Now, some people look at that and think, well, it's a little bit too early to be looking at that, but I don't think it is. I think the earlier that you can do that, you can then find something for them to naturally fall into once the career is over, because the career is very short and it goes very quickly. So we've had issue. For example, Rio Ferdinand's a player that we represented at one stage in his career at Man United, and he was very big on TV. So we were doing TV ideas with some of the big channels out there. Rio was presenting them and getting into that space of presenting. And before BT came on air, the production company that won the rights to do all the production for the Premier League rights, we had conversations with them way in advance about putting Rio into place. So ultimately, as his career came towards an end, he already had a relationship there, already had was comfortable in front of camera. So it made it a seamless approach from football into presenting. So I think at the very earliest point, we try to look at those opportunities. We try to tell players to look entrepreneurial. Let's look at some big Man United business fans that that might want to go into business with you and use your name because you're a name. Try and get yourself involved in different aspects of away from football. So there are lots of opportunities for you. So that is, I think, a very important part of it all. But still, even with all of that, you are going to get players that are going to be in that space because, they're used to a level of living and they just can't come down from that. And it's a very tough one, and all you can do is try and educate at the very earliest point and hope they take that through to the career. I think that players nowadays, younger players, are a lot more educated and a lot more savvy than players of the past, but I still think that we're going to still have those sorts of situations, but maybe lesser.
Just to jump in, I also think this is quite different to the women's game. So if you look at the women's game sort of in the last 10 years, a lot of the players had a dual career and still do. So they went to university, got a degree, still went through the pathway, but not so in the same way as the men's game, where the boys often, yes, there's the lessons that they go to as part of the academy, but didn't necessarily have a plan B. Whereas in the women's game, women did have that, and we have a lot of players now in the Women's Super League who are maybe chartered accountants or lawyers, and have that opportunity because realistically they're going to have to. They do not make the same money as men, as we all know. But now what's happening is with the younger female players, sort of 16 signing a contract with Arsenal, is that now becoming more like the men's game? And that is kind of a worry of me personally, especially when you look at the salaries of these female players. We're not talking numbers anywhere near that 150,000 a week. You're lucky if that's in a year. So I think these players now need to be supported to have the option to have that dual career, which maybe was an advantage for the slightly older players in the women's game who now have got that to fall back on as well.
Georgia, just because you took the mic, I have a question about women's football, because you are focused more in women's representation, which, as you know, I support. Do you think partnerships are different in the women's game and men's game?
I think they're very different, and I think there's been a few discussions today. If we look at a club level, actually, just away from the player for a second, with sponsorship of clubs, often like the women's team is added on as like an add-on. So, we're going to sponsor the front shirt of the men's team, we'll add in the women's as a package. But actually, if you look at the fan groups of women's football and men's football, it's often quite different. It's completely different audiences. You wouldn't really find the same people going to a men's game and a women's game. So it's actually a completely new, untapped audience. I would also say, although the number of fans there is obviously a lot lower, the engagement of the fans is a lot higher. And that connection to the players is something that is a lot stronger than in the men's game because of the size of it. And I think that's an opportunity for brands to kind of tap into such a niche and engaged audience that you wouldn't necessarily get in the men's game, because do you have that connection to a male player who's on 300 grand a month, whatever it is? Like, it's such a disconnect from the fans. So I think that there is a big difference there. And when it comes to brand deals, I always say, is a brand better off working with 10 female athletes who have 10,000 Instagram followers each, or one male athlete who has 100,000 followers? Who are the audience going to connect with more, and who is actually more likely to purchase or to engage with the brand? Even when you look at who are the purchase decision makers in households, quite often it's the wives, it's the women, and people tend to forget that. So looking at certain brands as well, it's making sure to actually engage with perhaps the people who might buy the product. And I think that's something that female players and also women's clubs need to try and leverage, because it's a huge difference to the men's game. It might be smaller, but there's a much more engaged audience there, and that goes the same for clubs and for players as well.
And Georgia, do you think agents are doing enough to leverage the brand of a player?
Yeah, I mean, you've put me on the spot. I think it's interesting as well, like the title of this panel, like, are the agents working for the players? And we're all agents up here, like, we're probably going to say yes. But actually, no, I don't think enough is being done. And I think often it is too much of a focus on, like, what's the best financial deal? And there is a bit of that happens. I think we've got some good panellists here who are, hopefully doing it for the right reasons. And I think, unfortunately, there's a few bad apples that maybe give the agents industry as a whole a bad name sometimes. But I do think there's more that can be done. And I think it's thinking outside the box a little bit. Often agents, I hear a lot of players come to me and they say, my agent said I can't get a Nike deal or an Adidas deal. And I say, okay, well, what else do you use, like, in your everyday life? What else do you use for training? Okay, well, let's think outside the box a little bit, nutrition-wise or gym wear-wise. And I think maybe that's an advantage I have as a female, is I do have to think a little bit differently. And of course, the boot deals are important, but even when you look at the Women's Super League, like I know of players who are captain for club and country and have to buy their own boots in the Women's Super League in England, which is a whole nother issue. But I think there's so much more that can be done, as I said, to leverage the niche audiences in the women's game.
Thanks, Georgia. Vitor, another tricky question for you. So everything you do daily is around players. We say, it's about, we know you represent even coach. So I have two questions in one. The first one, do you think there could be potentially a conflict of interest in representing coach and players sometimes of the same club or sometimes of the same country first? And are the players the main concern of your work, your daily work?
Okay. Well, I present myself as a football agent. So I'm not presenting myself as a player's agent or club's agent. How it works daily, it's true what Erkut said, that we are invoicing the clubs. So mostly we are representing the clubs. So, of course, we work with players and sometimes for players, and we work with clubs and sometimes for clubs. But every deal starts with a need, okay? Not because of the player's will to go, because every player wants to go to Barcelona or Real Madrid, but starts with a need. Is really Real Madrid or Barcelona looking for this profile of player? Because if it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. It doesn't depend on the will or on the agent, okay? So about conflict of interests. On my point of view, there's none. But of course, there's mixed emotions because sometimes you represent or we have a close link with a coach that is playing against one or two players that you also linked with. And it's a mixed emotion. Sometimes I'm watching the game and nobody knows which team I'm supporting with because I'm supporting both teams. So I don't think that this is a conflict of interest. Sometimes maybe some disputes can happen, because the coach that I work with is not putting the player that I work with playing, and some issues might come, but there's no conflict of interests.
Okay. I think it's an interior conflict every agent has clients in both teams playing against each other's, not knowing which one support. Erkut, you want to say
maybe
something?
just quickly on that one.
Yeah.
That's a very good point, actually. Good question. Is it a conflict of interest representing the coach and the player in the same club? And I think it can be. It depends on the case. It depends on the intentions of the agent and also intentions of the coach. If you put a coach into a club and tell the coach, look, I put you there into the club, but you need to get 3 players of me right away. That's a binding solution and that coach need to get players which actually might not suit the club. But the agents want to make still the deal to make money. So was the coach placed there for the agent's interest or for the coach's interest? So it depends on which way you look to it. If you find a job for a coach and place the coach there, and that's the coach's decision then to afterwards say, hey, actually, thank you for the deal. You represent me as an agent. By the way, you have also a play in your agency which suits me. The one you represented me makes sense for all parties. Then you can get also a player. It really depends on what the intentions are and what are you doing there, from which perspective you're looking. It can be a conflict, but it must not be. It really depends what you do. Chris?
I think if you're professional, it's never a conflict. I had a situation with a manager that I had at Blackpool in the Championship. They had 5 players in their playing squad, so they had a whole squad of players to fill. I didn't agent any single player that came into the club because they just weren't right for the football club. So I think with directors of football around and all that sort of stuff, it's less likely for those things to happen because at the end of the day, everyone wants to win football matches. So it's about getting the best players that are going to give you the chance of doing that.
And also depends on the power that the coach has, because sometimes it doesn't have any power, so it's not a conflict.
Okay. Another case we have, for example, even as in the agencies, like a player that wants to go into a club that is managed by a coach that we represent, but the coach doesn't want the player. In this case, there is a conflict of interest between the player's needs and the coach needs on the other sense. But anyway, the last question, Vitor, to you then, we maybe leave some space. There are some questions from all of you. What is the difference between, I will say, being an agent or being part of an agency?
Well, it depends on the stage that you are. If you started just now or if you are doing this for several years. As I said in the beginning, it was a sad day for me yesterday because I was here. I was not able to be with my players, but I had 3 guys from my company there with the players. So this is the difference between being an agent that was not present or being an agency that had the support of someone from my company there.
So will you see a successful, I will say, company of representation to call agency lead only from an agent or not in 2024?
Like Erkut said, I think well, we are a big agency, at least for Portugal, because we represent or we deal with more than 110 clients. But we are not big enough if we are comparing to other agencies that have 500 clients or 600 clients. So I think that in the future will be no space, and I will repeat, no space for a single agent. So single agent have to be linked with an agency, have to be part of a group, because if not, it will not survive.
Thanks, Vitor. You will say something?
Yeah, maybe with the exceptions of a father of a very good player, the father will be the single agent and has, or the brother, or the best friend, or the wife.
Or the wife, yes.
Or the wife. There will be always these kind of things where then a parent is representing a client, their own son or their own daughter, and because of that, you get maybe a couple of more clients. That's the only exception, I think.
Okay.
Not considering that FIFA in any way try to stop this thing, but parents are parents, so it is.
And I want just to say one thing, because Erkut already said enough and in brilliant way, but the FIFA issue is not about agents, it's about the law. So what they are fighting is the law, not the agents. The agents are just asking the questions and putting things on court, and then it's about the law.
Just to add to that, I think as a relatively new agent, it's quite hard to keep up as well because, for example, I'm also registered with the England FA, as you have to be FIFA licensed and then registered with the England FA, but then some of the FIFA rules now don't apply or are not relevant. So it's actually quite confusing as well for agents who are perhaps trying to do the right thing. So for me, I've kept like my fee cap as obviously under what FIFA is, but then that's up for discussion with England FA. So I think it's quite difficult as well when there are definitely agents out there like working the system and perhaps doing things for the wrong reasons. So yeah, I think it's obviously been great to hear from everybody here today, but there definitely is problems in the system, and hopefully that can be fixed with everything that's going on at the moment with FIFA.
Thanks, Georgia. Thanks to all of you, and I will ask for a big applause to all the guys that participate to this stage with me. I don't know if from someone wants to have some question, or if it's not, over there. Yes. Maybe I have to throw you the mic. Yes. Who wants to answer first?
So, I mean, is the question related to representing the selling, buying club and the player at the same time? If that creates a conflict of interest, is that the question?
Yes, more or less.
Generally, is the perception of conflict significant enough that you would make a comment to clarify why it's not a conflict? So if I see a deal where one agent is representing the club and the player, as a chartered accountant, as a corporate lawyer, to me it's very hard to see how you can sit on both sides. However, at the same time, Vitor's comment, I can see sometimes if there's a conciliation process, you want to bring the parties together with mediation, then there are benefits, and it's not a conflict, and you record that. So I'm asking, is perceived conflict something that you recognize? And in those situations, would you make a public comment to say, well, this is why it's not a conflict?
Me or?
Who wants to answer first?
I don't mind. You going to start? Or should I start? Okay. So now, thank you for the question, first of all.
He's a doctor first.
Yeah, so
Doctor and a lawyer, yeah.
Thank you for the question. I think it's a great question. And for me, for my personal opinion, you're a lawyer as well, you can't represent the best interest of three parties in the same deal. Simple for me. Like, it's from a legal perspective or ethical perspective, how will you represent the best interest of the selling club, the buying club, and the player? So everyone wants to save money somewhere, right? And how do you do it in the best interest? And then you need to also represent yourself to get the agent commission, right? So you need to get money as well. So you're representing all parties. I think representing all three parties, but football is a different world, right? We all agree. It has its different kind of ways of living and doing the game. I believe that representing the player and the buying club, it's just sometimes you represent both parties. In England, especially on a dual representation agreement, it has its advantages usually on tax-wise. That's why clubs doing it a lot of time. They put you also on the club side, but actually you represent only the player. But when it comes to get paid, you kind of represent also the club's interest and the player at the same time. It's called a dual rep agreement, especially in England. Very common, right? It's done all the time. But FIFA wanted to change that, as you also raised this point, and they wanted to only allow the player and the buying club to represent only, not anymore the selling club. But this is also right now, it's postponed or suspended. So we don't know what will happen, and we wait for the European Court's decision on that as well, regarding multiple representation. I think football has its own dynamics. It's a little bit different than the normal world. Also being as a lawyer, if I'm doing transaction with businesses, I see right away a conflict of interest. I can't do that. But in football, things are done in a different way. And I'm not saying it's the right way. I'm just saying it's a different way. In my perspective, it's definitely a conflict of interest, but what are parties doing? So we said it's a conflict of interest, yes. So the parties would sign a waiver, right? That's how football is doing that. It's amazing, actually. It's like unbelievable, actually. So every party in the deal would sign, I, as the buying club, have no problems with Erkut representing us, the player, and the selling club at the same time. The player would sign the same thing. The player would sign, I, as the player, don't see any conflict that Erkut represents all the parties in this deal, and the other party does the same. So everyone is kind of signing a waiver, and the conflict goes away, right? It doesn't go away. It's just a legally way of going around it. So that's the situation we are. And yeah, I give the word to my colleagues.
Well, there are occasions whereby I think there isn't a conflict. I've been in a situation representing three parties. And I think as long as you understand what each party want to achieve from that particular deal, then I don't see it as a conflict because I'm looking out for each party. I know what the instructions are from each side. So I'm trying to achieve that from each side. I'm not earning money from three sides though. I was earning in this particular deal from one side, but I was in the middle to make everyone happy, and at the end of the day, everyone was happy. So I think there are occasions where it might appear like a conflict, but I don't think it is a conflict if all three parties are participating and happy with the terms and the agreements going forward.
I think I agree. I think when it comes to the three sections, I do feel like there is more of a conflict. However, when it's the the buying club and the player, I feel it's less of a conflict because, as we mentioned earlier, I do think the player needs to fit in what the club actually needs. You know, we're not making up this need that, like Vitor said, like the need is there. So I think if you're genuinely doing something from a place of kind of a good place and you genuinely don't see it as an interest, like I would also, to your point, say, like, I would be happy to clarify that as a public statement if I genuinely was doing it with the best intentions for both parties. And I think maybe that's where things get confused, where people say they're doing things for the right reasons, then they're not, and then they don't come out and state that actually, I understand why this could look like a conflict. But I think if you've not done anything wrong, why would you have a problem with coming out and saying that?
Also, I must add, it depends on the kind of contract that you are signing, because when we sign contracts with the players, it doesn't mean that we will represent the player. Sometimes we are just there for promote the player or advise the player. So different goals than the ones that we have with the clubs. So there's no conflict of interests in this kind of contracts, okay? And I don't see any conflict, also like FIFA does, representing the selling club and the player at the same time, because who else then who's representing the player knows who's going to be the best move of the player, someone else or the person that is near to the player that knows what he wants, what he needs, someone else? I don't see it that way.
I think maybe briefly to add on that one is also many times is done with one agent because it's faster and simpler. In terms of having an agent, have 4 agents, selling club, buying club, you know, the player's agent, look, you have sometimes even more than 4. In some parties, you have 2, 3 agents. The clubs also prefer a lot of times saying, okay, there's only one agent, we all have to deal with the same agent, it's faster, transaction goes smooth, everyone knows everything. So that's also many times clubs prefer that as well, to only work with one agent, right? So just to do the deal easier and faster, especially on deadline days.
Thanks to all of you. Just to add something, and there's a question there, to these answers. I think that the problem legally here, on a legal base from my side, is even the fact that we still are understanding at the moment, at the stage, if FIFA has the rights to regulate a profession in Europe. So basically, every country in Europe with a civil or common law system has different kind of, they are making some signs we have to stop. I will try to run.
I was just asking because he just came over here slowly to make a statement without saying anything. That was smart. It was smart.
So the problem is even that. I mean, every country in Europe, of course, we don't have the same regulations. So even conflict of interest are treated differently from country to another. For example, in Italy, the Italian parliament made a specific interview on this case, just trying to regulate how is treated conflict of interest into a labor market, which is different, treated differently from England or to France or Spain. So, of course, FIFA is not taking at the moment into consideration the different meaning of conflict of interest, which is now leading to the European Court of Justice, the whole new FFAR, I think. Another question there.
Is speaking with me because he's my friend. He's putting me in a hot spot.
Vitor is promoting you, so you have to answer. Come on.
Okay, thank you. Also, I think that you guys acknowledge that mostly everything that we do for players is pro bono. So we are not taking money. Instead, we are investing. So yeah, I consider myself sometimes in this industry like a football head hunter. So we started by the need, and then we go and try to find the right profile. Of course, I will prioritize my own profile, the ones that I'm linked with, the ones that I'm promoting. But if it's not there, I need to look somewhere else. Okay, so that's my job.
Someone want to add?
Yeah, I think obviously we covered it, but like I think having something outside of football is really important. I think in the women's game, like a lot of the players that I work with already have that. It's quite different to the men's game, so they will have a degree and they will have something that they're ready for after football. One thing that I speak about quite often, I know we don't have a lot of time, but is personal branding. And I think people think a lot of the time that's social media, but it's not just that. It's kind of who you are as a person, and I think it's really understanding players and helping them understand who they are and what they can actually do outside of football. And I think particularly in the women's game, they don't necessarily always have the confidence to actually show who they are as a person. I work with one young player. She's 20 years old. She's signed with the WSL club, but she's also really into Formula One. She's actually on a scholarship at the moment with Mercedes, and that's obviously incredible. So I think just making sure that they're supported to say it's okay to have other things outside of football. And I think that's sometimes where the men's game has maybe gone wrong, because the young players perhaps get a terrible injury and actually don't have anywhere else to go. So making sure that they have things outside of football, I think, is really important.
I think that's a big thing for us. As I said, with our holistic approach, how we take it with young players is we make sure they're educated in, you might not make it. One of the first statements that we make is that, look, your chances of making it are literally 1%. So therefore, you know what you're up against. And you try and sort of nurture from them what other interests they have. You also make sure they kind of understand how the business works from a legal perspective, that there are other opportunities within football that they can still be involved in if they don't make it as players. So they can be lawyers, they can be accountants, they can be all these other things that are in the football industry. So I think more and more, especially sort of like Arsenal, for example, their mantra to the young players is that you're renting the shirt. So, you know, you've got to keep holding on to that, so you're only renting it. So I think that it's getting better, much better than what it was, say, 10 years ago. So that's something that's really important for us in what we do, and I think clubs are getting better at that.
And just to close from my side too, we say not only all of these relevant things, but agencies are not only football consultant, but we help players even, for example, when we make a transfer, in finding, for example, housing, so house, the place we become a real estate agent sometimes, or we take care of them in the nutritionist plan, especially in the young cases or smaller clubs, when you don't have this much facilities or knowledge or expertise or budget from clubs. So a lot of them has even sometimes the need of a psychologist or psychotherapist, all of the things that the club cannot provide for any reason or that are not enough, we try to help them. So it's football agents means everything football related. Even the school is an important part for players. They need to grow on that side too, to prepare for what they will do next when they finish their career. Other question? I don't think, no, it will come my head, no? Okay, no question, no more question. Over there, yes. Someone wants to answer?
Well, I think to ban transfer fees, we're going to be in big trouble, aren't we? Lawyer, help us.
No, I mean, I know that, and I think regarding, I mean, it started with the Bosman case, 1995, right? There was, and now we're talking about maybe something like that that happen again, maybe, like that players even can move out of the club even while they're within their contracts, and can go to another club without the transfer fee. And that's the discussion. You just actually raised the point. It's a very interesting. So it would be actually Bosman 2.0, they say. And so it would change the football world. And it would change also for FIFA would be a big problem, because now they created a bank. Now where the money going, right? So, I mean, of course, they're not in favor of that. But the European Court of Justice, or generally the agenda in the last few years, if you guys follow that, it's against monopoly. It's against that what FIFA and UEFA are actually trying to do. It's more democratizing things. It makes it more openly that UEFA and FIFA can't decide what they want to do, because in many cases it's not compatible with European law. And this is one of these cases as well. I can't predict the case, to be honest. It's a very interesting case. I like it, and I'm waiting for the outcome. But it will change the football world massively, more than the Bosman case, I guess. And yeah, it's a very interesting thing to follow. Personally, if you ask me if there shouldn't be any transfer fees, I mean, it's a different case. It's a very difficult to answer. But I believe the amounts which are paid today are not reflecting the real value. I mean, no player is 200 million worth or 100 million. I don't believe in that. That's overpriced. This is the market. I mean, that's unbelievable, the money they got paid for these kind of things. It doesn't make sense to me, right? And I think that could be regulated in a way we do in the United States. A lot of things are capped, a salary cap, fees and stuff. Maybe something like that will enter one day the European or the football world as well, because a lot of money is paid for these kind of things and less money is used for actual things we need, for the players off the pitch, right? We talked today how much things they need, psychology, for example. So many have depression today. We don't even talk about that, right, in this world. And I think money could be used wisely also on other parts of football. That's my personal opinion. So he wants to, okay, clap. Okay, well done.
I think we'll finish. Okay. Thanks to all of you. Thanks guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.